All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here, we're doing our preview and prediction for the 2025 Nebraska Cornhuskers. Getting things started with this staff. Matt Rule, 12-13 mark through 2 seasons. Dana Holgerson, second year on staff. He'll be the offensive coordinator after being in that role over the final month of the 2024 season. And then John Butler replaces the outgoing Tony White, second year on staff as well for him. Really good offseason, 22nd in the high school ranks, 13th in the portal. And then this is their first winning season since 2016, Nick. So I think Matt Rule's doing a phenomenal job finally getting them back to a bowl, really just the postseason. And then, of course, they won that bowl game. Looking at the Nebraska offense, this is a group, statistically wasn't all that great. But I think coming into 2025, there's a lot to like. The aforementioned Holgerson, him coming in as offensive coordinator really allowed their run game efficiency to grow. A faster-paced offense, I think, led to better balance. They returned 5 stars, and they had a nice offseason as well. We're going to start with Dylan Raiola, top-ranked quarterback in last year's high school class. They gave him the keys instantly, and I think that was the right decision. This is a guy that showcased really good arm, nice ability to layer with precision, has a nice strong arm as well. I thought the placement downfield and tight coverage was really impressive. Pretty solid pocket navigation. He had plenty of ill-advised throws. Seems to be a smart player. Most of his interceptions came on him just trying to make plays or on a fourth down end of the game, trying to force it. He's not just out here blatantly getting fooled by coverage, so even though he did have a couple of picks to his name, I don't think they're as alarming as the stats might indicate. I think as an next 5-star, Nick, this guy's eventually going to live up to the billing. I think that's going to start very early on in 2025.
I agree that it was the right decision to start Dylan Raiola last year as a true freshman. Normally I don't advise starting true freshman quarterbacks. I've been very vocal about that on this show. But I think he was a exception, right? I think this made a lot of sense for Dylan Raiola to start, week for this team and be a really good team player in year one. Yes, there were ups and downs, but I thought there were a lot of positivities that took away. First off, the accuracy was solid, 67% comp rate on 2,800 yards, pretty solid there, 410 attempts passing last year. 13 touchdowns. You would like to see that number certainly rise, and 11 interceptions is certainly a concerning number if you're a Cornhuskers fan. Want to hope that finds a way to be cut down this season. But overall, I thought he looked calm in the pocket. Like you said, a lot of those mistakes were made in situations where he was trying to make something out of nothing, where he was rolling the dice a little bit more. And I think I'm lenient and forgiving for a young quarterback when they make an issue like that. It was a big statement move by Matt Rule to go out and land this guy a 5-star, get him from high school, a kid that was previously committed to USC, committed to Georgia, really bounced around his commitment for a while there. He was a high-profile, highly sought-after recruit that plugged in to an offense that desperately needed a star quarterback to rally around and a fan base that needed a quarterback to support here. I think he'll only get better as time goes on. Another year in the system, another year of learning the offense this offseason should do him wonders. Another year of practice should do him wonders, and I think he'll be quite strong once the season kicks off in late August. I have a lot of confidence in Dylan Raiola, and I think he'll be really strong for this offense this year.
I love some of the playmakers he has. They went to the portal and got a couple of nice guys. Start with Dane Key from Kentucky. Great hands of elite focus. He's good at coming down with the ball, even with a defender draped all over him. Not much yak or speed. Still a big playmaker downfield at 6'3", 210. Desire Hunter, 6'2", 210 as well. Great outside pass catcher. Has some really good games. Didn't top 100 yards once, but showcased good hands and physicality. I think he's a rising star in college football at Cal. The depth isn't all that ideal. Hardly Gilmore also comes over from Kentucky after barely playing as a freshman. He's a long strider that can get vertical. Strong hands, suddenness as a route runner will likely need to continue to develop with limited experience and played weaker competition in high school. Demetrius Bell, 6 foot 185, enters a 30 on the program with no touches to his name. Janarian Bonner barely played last year, but all of his snaps came out of the slot. 6'2", 220. They have an incoming 4-star Cortez Mills, likely to see some time as well. And they have another guy in Ja'Cory Barney, who I think is going to be tremendous. Nick, this is a guy who got plenty of touches last year, and he impressed in those, 55 reps for 447. So he was a focal point. He had 10 carries, rushing for 130 and 3 scores. So he's an explosive playmaker. They're going to look to get the ball into his hands as much as possible. These numbers are pretty much force-feeding him the football. So I think that this is a nice group of pass catchers. I love what they did in the portal. Do you think there's enough depth here for this passing attack to be legit?
I am concerned about the depth. I think the depth is a little bit shallow here, but I do like some of the ads they have. I think bringing back Barney, who's a really good gadget player, you can do a lot with him. He had those 3 rushing touchdowns on 10 attempts. They get him involved in that jet sweeps, different sort of setups for him. Had 55 catches for 447, and he was solid in those reps. No receiving touchdowns, but I think they'll find a way to get him in the end zone this year. Dane Key was an interesting ad from Kentucky. That is, he previously was from Lexington, went to high school in Lexington, Kentucky. Was a hometown kid. Didn't really have as productive of a season in terms of touchdowns in 2024. Had 2 touchdowns and 715 yards receiving. Had 630 for him in 2023 and 6 touchdowns. So he didn't really get the touches in the red zone last season, but he was still a really solid player for this team. Had a decent day against Ole Miss, which included 105 yards receiving and a touchdown in what was a win for the Wildcats last year. I think Key's a really good ad. You can play him in a couple different spots here. Probably going to slot in the wide receiver X position right now, but I think he's a really talented player that is quite versatile. While Neziah Hunter as well was not a bad ad from Cal. He had a decent season last year, 5 receiving touchdowns and 575 in terms of yards. It was pretty good, 40 grabs overall for him. He had solid hands at Cal. I think he was a guy that also had some solid games, had a good game against Oregon State, right at 85 yards and a touchdown on that one. Had 2 touchdowns against Auburn early in the season and an upset win on the Plains for the team out west. I like the ad there. I think Hunter's a really solid player. They bring in Demetrius Bell, doesn't really have any touches for this program, but he's hoping to step up as well and be a key part of this offense. They added some freshmen from their classes, and Cortez Mills is a guy that they really think could potentially be involved early on, a kid that's got some high upside. This is definitely a shallower room, but I still think it's a room that's got some solid spots. The depth concerns me, but I think there's some solid key players here that can step up and be very important for this offense early on.
If they stay healthy, I think the passing attack will be just sharp. Now I move to the run game. This is a group that has some nice depth at running back, at least in prior years. It's going to be a little bit more tested this fall. Emmett Johnson will take over as the starter. Good versatility. He's a valuable pass catcher. Hard worker. He's tough to get on the ground, always moving his feet. Good one-cut runner with vision. Pretty horrendous blocker, though, in ball security with a larger workload. Really seemed to struggle for him. 5'11", 200. Quentin Ives, an athletic 3-star in his third year in the program. Played a wide receiver in high school. 6'3", 210. That's pretty odd size for a running back, so we'll see if that's really where they keep him at. He's in a battle with incoming 4-star Jamarian Parker. He's got great speed and elusiveness. Needs to add on some more mass at only 185 pounds, though. So the running back room, Nick, not even close to what we've seen in years past, but I think Johnson's going to do well as the RB1, and I think these 2 guys behind him will do quite well in their respective touches as long as they don't, have any busted assignments and they have good ball security. I think they'll do just well. And again, the rushing attack was much better, over the last month of the season against some solid defenses as well with Holgerson at charge. Only one 200-yard game running the ball last year, though, so they weren't really all that great. I think the balance might be coming for Nebraska.
I think the balance is certainly on its way, and while it's a weaker running back room, again, weaker than it was last year, I still think Emmett Johnson's a really good back to lead the way. About 600 yards for him on the ground last year, 5.1 yards per carry and a touchdown. He's a very valuable asset in the passing game. I know I spoke about the weaknesses in the wide receiver room and said I didn't like the depth there. I think Johnson really does sort of add that extra blanket of security there. He had 2 receiving touchdowns last year and just under 300 yards on 40 grabs. So I think he's a guy you can really find a way to target and get involved in your offense. I think that kind of makes you feel better if you're a Nebraska fan. There's somebody there that you can target and get a little bit more out of on this offensive group here. I think Ives is not a bad back either. He'll be a solid number 2 back. Jamarian Parker, they think he'd be really solid coming out of high school, a guy that they really have a lot of faith in early on. This is a running back room. I think the coaching will certainly help here. The play style, some of the balance will be better there. They were 96th in the nation last year at running the ball. Obviously, those numbers are a little skewed because they didn't play really well at running the ball earlier in the season. They were certainly a lot better in the second half of the season. I think we'll see closer to the second half of the season than we will to the first half of the season. I know I'm concerned about some of the fall off in production, but overall, though, I still think this is a group that returns some solid guys, and Johnson leading the way makes me feel pretty confident in them.
Only 2 games total, well, 3 that is, of over 150 yards, and that came against pretty weak opponents. Purdue and UTEP are 2 of those, so that really doesn't even count. Looking at the offensive line, at one point, this was a weakness for the Nebraska program for many years. They were just abysmal. And now, Nick, they've worked it into a strength. If you look at the graphic I have, that's what I think the biggest plus for this unit is. Gunnar Gotola was the main left tackle last fall, played his best ball late in the season. Young players should continue to get better. Justin Evans returns at left guard. He was their best player up front. Very sound in all regards. Looks like we'll be moving the center, though, to accommodate the Notre Dame import, Rocco Spindler. He was a phenomenal right guard for the Irish. Henry Ladovsky returns, and I assume he'll stay packed at right guard, so that's going to be, the reasoning on some of that shuffling there. He was dominant in pass pro, allowing 0 sacks all season long. Really good run blocker as well. Biggest problem here is right tackle. Elijah Pritchett comes over from Alabama, where he was straight up awful for them at that position. I think he's going to improve, though, if it changes scenery. Don't anticipate he'll be as bad as he was for the Tide. They also have 2 veteran tackles in Turner Cochran, who's been quite poor in his career, and then Teddy Prohashka. So, I really like this O-line. They have some proven depth. They have a talent to mix and match if needed. I I think this is a great offensive line, Nick, and I gotta give the staff Rule props to being able to stick with these guys and work this unit into being a very respectable one.
Rules put together a pretty solid offensive line here. I don't think Elijah Pritchett is very good. He was bad at Alabama last year. Really odd ad for me. I don't know if he's going to be really good. Penciling right now is starting right tackle. Maybe they'll move him around, probably play him at tackle, but I think you can probably do better than him, what they already had on the roster. Sam Sledge, I think, is a really good center here. He's a younger player getting more experience, while Gunnar Gottula as well was also a younger player who's getting more experience. Justin Evans is a really solid left guard, who I think will be a key leader for this team, as will Henry Lutzovsky, who is really solid for this team at right guard. The two guards there, I trust those guards a lot, and they're two guys that have been around the program for a while that can step up and be really key pieces here. They may move a couple pieces here and around. Grant Seagreen, is a solid younger player as well that could potentially be involved in this offensive line group. I like this offensive line. This is a big physical unit here. I like the size of them. I think the footwork and hands are solid on all these guys as well. I think the blocking is really good. Run blocking is certainly solid here, which I think is why you'll see an improvement in the running game, even if the running back room has gotten a little bit weaker here. I think the rushing attack will be better this year. I like this O-line a lot, and it paves the way for this offense, which I think really puts them in a good position.
Yeah, I mean, the two deep is just really impressive for this offensive line. I think they got plenty of bodies they can throw in to be starters if need be. So I'm very impressed with what they have all together. B-plus offense for me. I think they can continue to work their way up in terms of grading. I know the numbers last year, again, were very poor, but I think you're going to see them be significantly better. I think they'll be top 50 in most of these areas come season end, Nick. If the Cornhuskers can take a big leap forward in 2025 due to all the tools the offense brings to the table, they have a five-star quarterback that played good in his debut season. The offensive line I love. Nice trio of pass catchers at the forefront. And I think as long as this run game figures it out and the running backs play good, they can be very efficient. High upside here, B+.
I think it's a high upside unit. Certainly, I think it's a B+ unit, right? I think they can get in the top 50 in the four key categories we have listed there. Those stats last year, only one of them was even close to the top 50, and that was pass yards per game at 65. 65th in the nation, that is. I think that's certainly be a top 50 unit come the end of the season here. I love what Raiola can do at quarterback. I think he'll continue to develop and grow in this passing attack. I didn't even mention Rocco Spindler when I talk about the offensive line. I apologize about that. He's a great ad from Notre Dame. I'm curious to see what he can do. Dane Key was a very underrated ad from Kentucky, a guy you can get a lot out of and really be versatile. Emmett Johnson, I think, is a big breakout potential at back, potentially one of the bigger breakout stars in the conference this year for me, who will get a lot of touches and be a key asset for this running back room. The O-line is great. They'll pave the way. I think Holgerson calling the plays will certainly find some more balance in this passing/rushing attack. They'll be able to really balance and run effectively on the ground, get themselves in good position here. I love what this offense can do.
Now you move to the defensive side of the ball. This was a great defense for Nebraska last year. Only game that really got tossed in was the Indiana one. Other than that, they were pretty rock solid for the most part throughout the season. Even against Ohio State, they held them to under 300 yards. In the back half of the season, they played great ball. But now you replace significant amount of starters. Only 3 of them are coming back. Tony White departs as defensive coordinator, so you're kind of starting from scratch here. And if you want to compete in the Big Ten, they're not going to be able to be sluggish for too long. The entire starting defensive line departs. Added an X5-star in last year's class, and Williams DeWarnery from Missouri, a guy of great length, athletic abilities, very good in pursuit, can play outside or inside. True sophomore Keona Davis, he's going to be leaned on a good bit off the edge. That jack edge rushing position likely to be occupied by Dazon McCullough, 6'5", 223. Didn't pan at Oklahoma like we thought he would as a versatile player who can play off ball in the slot, come off the edge. I think he's going to be an important asset for this defense. Willis McGahee didn't do much in his first year. The interior D-line gets back 2 veterans in Elijah Judy, who has 6'3", 285. Hasn't been all that great in his career. Cameron Lenhart, I think, is going to be a breakout star. His versatility, some good power. The staff loves him. He played early on in his career here. Picked up Jalen George from East Tennessee State. Was really good run defender for them. Might stay on the edge, though, as he's only 265 pounds. Riley Van Poppel, 6'5", 290. He's been quite good. He's been quiet, that is, in his first 2 seasons. Gabe Moore, 6'4", 290, comes over from Mississippi State, but no experience. So there's a lot of youth here. Lose some major players on the D-line, especially on the interior. I think they have good enough versatility to keep a good pass rush, but overall a step back up front is expected. I don't think it's going to be crippling. They also have a great defensive line coach they picked up, Terry Braden from the Kansas City Chiefs, Nick. I think that's something that's certainly going to help them out as well.
I think they'll certainly be a step back here. I do think they have some solid pieces overall, but I'm expecting a little bit of a regression for this defensive unit here. I think Lenhart is a really solid player, 16 total tackles for him, 3 tackles for loss, half a sack for him, while Elijah Judy had 13 total tackles and 2 tackles for loss. In his reps, I think those are 2 guys you can get a lot out of there. I think they're really solid. Keona Davis was a really solid player, coming out of high school, could really be solid for them coming off the left side there. I think he's a good edge rusher that puts some solid pressure there. I'm curious to see what McCullough looks like coming over from Oklahoma. Did not work out for him at Oklahoma, but still a guy that's got a lot of high upside, high potential. Had 30 total tackles in 2023, 3.5 tackles for loss, 3 QB hurries, 3 pass breakups, had 17 total tackles and 2.5 tackles for loss in 2024, where he really didn't get a whole lot of opportunities. Did have a big day against Alabama, though, had 5 tackles in that one, including half a tackle for loss. So he's a guy that you can certainly rely on in some of those potentially tougher games. Williams Namari is a really interesting add from Missouri, a guy that didn't really do anything at all, only played in 2 games and only had recorded tackles against UMass, where he had a sack against a very bad team. But outside of that, I think that you're looking at a potential way to develop this unit and get some better guys in here. I think they have some solid depth overall. I think Jalen George is a good add from the FCS level, a guy that can potentially step up and be involved in this pass rush here. It's concerned for me, right? It's a weaker unit. Certainly, I think the sacks numbers will be poor, and they'll be a little bit weaker against the run. They were a top 10 unit against the run last year. But I think they're not going to be a massive fall off. I think they'll still be able to compete in the Big Ten with this defensive line.
Now we move to the middle of the defense. I think the linebacking group's the biggest strength for the Huskers. Javen Wright, the leader in this group, didn't see the field as much in 2024, but he had the 3rd most tackles for them in 23. It's been good versus the run his entire career. Vincent Shavers was solid in his appearances during the season. Saw a full workload versus Boston College in the bowl game. He was great. 6 tackles, 2.5 TFL. He had a sack as well. Pick up Marquise Watson-Trent. This guy's been elite the last 3 years for Georgia Southern. Took his game to a new level with his dominance versus the run last season. 347 tackles across that 3-year stretch with the Eagles. They also have a 3rd-year man in Dylan Rogers, didn't play last fall. Certainly not the deepest group, but worst case, Dazon McCullough can slide into the middle, Nick. That being that versatile player they have from Oklahoma. I like what they have here altogether, Nick. Again, I think this is a great strength for them. I don't know how they're going to get Watson-Trent on the field, so that'll be something to monitor early because that's a tackle machine that I'd like to see there. But in this 4-2-5, or 3-3-5, that is, where are they going to find him onto the field? I'm not sure. But this is a strength for this defense, even if the depth isn't all that profound.
Yeah, I like the 3 guys they have here. I think this is a really strong linebacking core. It starts with Javen Wright, who was not, phenomenal for them last year. Saw an increase or a decreased workload, that is, only played in 9 games, 34 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss. He was really good for them in 2023. Had 51 total tackles and 1.5 tackles for loss that year. Had 2 interceptions, 2 pass breakups in 2023. They're hoping to replicate that from him in this year. We're curious to see where they use him. I think Vincent Shavers was solid in his reps as well as a younger player. He was a true freshman last year, 25 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and a sack for him. Solid numbers there. A great add out of the portal from Georgia Southern. Marquise Watson-Trent was so good for Georgia Southern the past 2 years. 120 tackles in 2024, 122 in 2023, had 7.5 tackles for loss in 2024, had 13 the year before that, had 2 QB hurries in each of those years, had 4 forced fumbles this past season as well. He was a monster all over the field. He's a tackle machine. He absolutely eats up guys. There were multiple games last year where he had double-digit tackles, had 14 tackles in 2 of those games. Really strong numbers from him. Want to see how they use him as well. Could they move him around a little bit? Can they get more out of him? I think they could potentially move him in different sort of variables, put him in a couple different plays here, and get a lot of use out of him because I think he's a phenomenal player. Watson-Trent was a great add out of the portal.
I move to the secondary. Marquise Buford, one of the veterans in this secondary. Impressive versatility. Does a little bit of everything. Wasn't all that great in coverage, though. Andrew Marshall comes over from Idaho after 2 really good seasons. Sierra Wright coming off a great resurgent season from him. He was really respectable in coverage, very impressive versus the run. The rest of the cornerback room's a little iffy. Bly Hill only played in 1 game. Maury Sanders only had a few snaps. And then Malcolm Hartzong struggled in coverage last season. He's destined to return to a full-time role in the slot, though. He's been in the program for years. And he's also been a great run defender. Poor tackler, though. Missed a team-high 15 tackles, that being Hartzong last year. Added Jameer Khan, who was a great player for Southern Illinois. Seems like Rule likes to dip to the FCS to add corners in the portal, Nick. We'll see if it works. Safety group will be largely revamped, but do get back to Sean Singleton, who spent as much time in the box as the linebackers did. Really good run defender, and he was second on this team in stops. A couple of three-star sophomores and Justin Rhett, a UGA transfer. And then Mario Buford's going to battle for a starting safety nod as well. Ramir Stewart's also in the fold. Not much is known on these younger cats, but, it's a well-coached group. I think overall the secondary should be sound and should probably showcase some improvements. A couple of things here to note, Nick, because I alluded to all the youth at safety and then the guys from the FCS level at corner, like Marshall and Hill. Do you think that's a bold strategy? It's a little odd what they have going on in the secondary. I still think they're going to be stout.
Yeah, you're rolling the dice a little bit going down to the FCS level, but I trust the coaching here. I think Marshall is probably the one that's going to pan out the best. He was really good at Idaho, played solid football up there, was a very reliable corner. Probably going to slot him on the left side. I think that's his preferred side. A little bit stronger for him, but he has played on the right side as well at times. Marshall could be really solid for this team. Well, Rhett, I think, could potentially be involved as well, but I'm not sure how much of a reliability he is. It's a gamble, but I like Matt Rule's coaching. I think he trusts these guys. He went out and broke down the film on these guys and went out and grabbed kids in the FCS level that he thinks can make instant impacts immediately. Now, the jump is certainly steep, but I think you can find a way to get a lot out of these guys. I do think this is a good unit, though, right? I like Singleton a lot, returning 71 total tackles for him, 1 tackles for loss, and a pick, 3 pass breakups. Malcolm Hartzog, I love this player. If he can clean up the tackles, I think he'll be a really strong player and a potential breakout player in the conference. But I just, he's got to find a way to clean up those missed tackles there. That's one of his weaknesses, 45 total tackles, but really good in coverage. 4 picks last year, 4 pass breakups, really good. Marquise Buford was also good in coverage, 35 total tackles, a tackle for loss, a pick, and 5 pass breakups. Good numbers there, while Tommy Hill and Reps had 21 total tackles, a pick, and a pass breakup for him as well. He's a guy that's a little bit further down the depth chart that they hope to get involved as well. Overall, this is a really solid unit in my opinion, right? There's some depth here. There's some solid pieces. They went out and added some guys from the FCS level, which I think is certainly a gamble here. But Mario Buford, a younger player that should certainly be involved and get some opportunities at free safety. Singleton, I think, is a really good, reliable player at strong safety. This is a secondary unit that's a bit weaker, certainly, just like the defensive line. I think the secondary is slightly better here. They were not bad against the pass at times last year. I'm expecting them to be a pretty solid unit overall, though.
The aforementioned Bly Hill, he transferred in last year from St. Francis. So, Rule must see something in these guys that dip that low into the portal to get players that, I'm sure they could get quality corners from the Par 4 level. So it'll be interesting to see how those guys pan out. The verdict for this defense, the Cornhuskers don't return many starters, but have experience in the middle and in the secondary. I think the biggest key to this puzzle is how much the D-line can regresses following some big-time losses. I don't expect drastic fallout by any means, as I really trust the coaching and a good amount of the talent. But it's certainly possible the loss of Tony White and some of those stars leads to them being a mid-level group. I'm going to go with a B that is kind of mid-level, but I don't think they're going to get gashed up too bad in any games, especially with some of the offenses they face. This will be a good defense, Nick. I don't see them, again, giving up 40 points or 500 yards in any contest or even anywhere close to that.
I think this will be a really steady, solid unit in the Big Ten, right? I think that won't be the strongest defense overall, certainly, but they won't be one of the worst defenses. They were really good last year. They do lose a lot of starters. Only returning 3 plus losing your defensive coordinator is never easy. But I think the adjustments will be solid here. I like what they have at linebacker. It's a very strong unit with some solid leadership. They went in the portal and added a great player in Watson Trent, who was so fun to watch at Georgia Southern. I like what they have there. The secondary, I think, is a good enough unit. The defensive line concerns me at times. I think they'll find a way to improve throughout the season and still be strong against the run. I like what this defense can do. I trust the coaching. I trust what Matt Rule can do here as well. As a former linebacker himself, I like the way that this could be set up here. I think this will be a really solid defense.
Now you move to the schedule and the prediction for Nebraska. They're going to be really tough out this fall, and the offense should make some major strides in the defense. Even if it regresses, is destined to showcase grit and toughness. And in the lower scoring games, they have no issue getting into a slugfest. Playoff is really not out of the question one bit with this ball club, especially if the front seven can exceed expectations. The over-under is 7.5. Seems quite low for the potential this team brings to the table. 10-2 for me, Nick. I know that might seem like, kind of outlandish, but I don't think enough people are talking about what this team brings to the table. And they're not talking about how the schedule is really picture perfect. You have Michigan and USC at home. Minnesota will be tough on the road, but it's certainly not a game that I'm too concerned about because I think that they're the more talented ball club. Iowa, that's always a tough one late in the year. Cincinnati, I think they're like 10-point underdogs right now. That's a reasonable team to compete with at a neutral site. I think they lose to UCLA, a bit of a trap game there on the road. I think they'll be a pretty solid team that's going to be really competitive, so I think the Bruins will get them there. And then at Penn State, I think they're going to lose that one as well, Nick. But if they're undefeated and they go in November 8th and lose to UCLA, that would really put a damper on playoff hopes. But they're obviously probably going to be favorites in that game. What is the likelihood they are undefeated, Nick, come middle of November? Because I think this team will be in the fold when it comes to, playoff rankings. And that's the bold prediction we have right now.
Yeah, so for the first time since Dalton and I were in elementary school, there's a real buzz about potential success in Lincoln, Nebraska here. One of the best fan bases in college football, if not the best fan base in college football. They come out, they sell out that place every single week, and they really show up and they support their team. There's a possibility that they are undefeated late in the season. Like you said there, the schedule plays up really nice for them. If this team finds a way to beat Penn State on the road, I certainly think they will be in the college football playoff. That would be the marquee win that Matt Rule needs. I think you can find a way to get there here. The schedule is pretty easy. trying to find those losses to get to the under there, right? You said 7.5 was the over-under. Trying to find 5 losses on the schedule is a very difficult task. I just don't really seem to find 5 losses at all here. I think this is a very strong team that puts themselves in a very good position. Is the trip to Minnesota October 18th a tough one? Yeah, I'm keeping my eye on that one. Certainly, the trip out west to UCLA is never easy. Although I do think they win that game. I believe they'll lose to USC the week before, another team I'm quite high on. And obviously going to Penn State in a game and against a team that's competing for national title in Happy Valley in Penn State is a very tough one, although Matt Rule did play there, so a bit of a homecoming for him. He played under Joe Paterno back in the 90s, so an interesting game that means a little bit more for him as well. The game against Cincinnati opening the season on Thursday night I think is quite fascinating in Kansas City, home of the Kansas City Chiefs, playing at Arrowhead. Quite an interesting matchup there. Kind of an odd spot for it, but I think it's kind of cool as well. A game I'll be keeping an eye on. I think Cincinnati can keep that competitive early on, but Nebraska should pull away as things get underway further into the game here. This could be a big year for Matt Rule. When you look at Matt Rule's coaching history at Temple and Baylor, the first year was always a struggle for him, really bad season, a losing record. The second year, he got a winning record, found some momentum. And then it was the third year where he really hit his stride at both programs. At Temple, his third year, he went 10-4 and won the Eastern Division, the American Conference. In 2019, he went 11-3 at Baylor in his third year, finishing second in the Big 12 and competing in the conference title game, going to the Sugar Bowl here. Can this team compete for a conference title? I think it's certainly possible here. He seems to put it together the third year. The trend would suggest that. He's got a great roster, a star quarterback in the making, a former 5-star. I think Emmett Johnson's a really good underrated player, while I think some of the key pieces on defense, including Malcolm Hartzog, is a really fun, talented player that will certainly continue to develop and turn strong as the season goes on here. The sky's the limit for Nebraska. The schedule is certainly favorable, a great fan base, a tough home environment, which will be sold out every single week here. Why not Nebraska? I'm certainly buying into it. This team can certainly make some noise this year and be a big key player in the Big Ten.
Great point you make there. With Rule being money in his third seasons at programs, and with what they have here, based on this roster we just looked at, and knowing that former history with him, I think there's special things in store. So 10-2 right now. Obviously, UCLA, the game is pretty much be projecting an upset. So 11-1, I think, would put them into the playoffs. I think this is respectable enough. Can't wait to watch this team, Nick. And this is one of the things I don't think most college football media is going to probably put down with Nebraska. I don't think they're going to take them that serious. They're not going to pick them to win 10 games. So I think this is one thing we're going to be right on come December.
I've always said Nebraska is one of the biggest sleeping giants in college football, if not the biggest sleeping giant. Well, it's time to wake the giant a little bit here. I think this team will break out. The media will certainly be talking about them, and it starts August 28th. National television primetime game on a Thursday night. I think a lot of people will get a first look at Nebraska and say to themselves, hey, damn, this team can win some football games this year. Excited for that matchup against Cincinnati, counting down the days till that game.
Like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.